I never thought the day would come when my own daughter would look me in the eye and tell me I wasn't welcome in her home. I raised her with my bare hands, gave up opportunities, gave up sleep, gave up happiness, all for her. And yet, there I was, standing at the entrance of her brand new house, hearing words that pierced deeper than any knife. Her husband was standing just behind her, smirking, his hands shoved into the pockets of his expensive tailored trousers. His watch glistened under the porch light, like he wanted me to see it, like he wanted to remind me of the difference between a man like him and a man like me. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it already is," she said, her tone calm but rehearsed. "This is my new life now. Things are different. You'll always be my father, but we need space." Space. That was the word she used, as though the years I carried her in my arms, fed her with my last penny, worked double shifts so she could have a future, were nothing but an inconvenience now. I forced a smile. "I understand," I said quietly. Her eyes flickered, almost like she wasn't expecting me to take it so well. Maybe she thought I'd beg, maybe cry, but I didn't. I nodded once, turned, and walked down the steps. I could feel the husband's smug eyes burning into the back of my neck, almost daring me to make a scene. I didn't give him that satisfaction. When I got into my old car, I sat there for a moment, staring at their house. It was big, yes, white pillars, grand windows, shiny cars in the driveway. To the outside world, they looked like the perfect couple, the rising stars. But I knew better. I had seen men like him before. Men who built their castles on sand, and the tide was always waiting. I started the engine, the familiar cough of the old machine filling the night. As I pulled away, I thought back to the beginning, back when it was just me and her. Her mother had left when my daughter Anna was only 6. She said she was tired of the struggle, tired of living paycheck to paycheck, tired of a husband who lacked ambition. What she never understood was that my ambition wasn't for myself, it was for my family. When she left, Anna clung to me. She was my reason to keep going. I turned down promotions that would have sent me traveling for weeks at a time, just so I could be home with her. I worked long hours at the firm, then came home and cooked dinner, helped her with homework, sat by her bed when she was sick. I still remember the nights when I'd count out change just to buy her a new pair of shoes, pretending it was nothing, pretending I wasn't worried about how I'd pay the electric bill. She never saw the struggle. I didn't want her to. And then came college. She got into one of the best universities in the country. I didn't know how I would afford it, but I found a way. I cashed out the small retirement savings I had built. I sold my mother's jewelry. I took out loans in my name. Every cent went to her education. When she graduated, I thought the hard years were finally over. She landed a job at a good firm, and for a while, she still called me every Sunday, still visited once in a while, still said, "I love you, Dad," before hanging up. But then she met him, David. From the very first handshake, I didn't like him. There was something in his eyes, a hunger, but not the good kind. It wasn't ambition to build, it was ambition to take. He dressed too sharp, spoke too smooth. Every story he told sounded rehearsed. He always mentioned money. How much this cost, how much that deal brought in, the connections he had. I knew men like that. At the firm, I had seen files, numbers, patterns. I had worked behind the scenes in accounting for decades. Men like him never lasted. They flew too close to the sun. But Anna, she was blinded. He made her feel like a queen. He swept her off her feet with expensive dinners, vacations, gifts. She saw in him everything I couldn't give her, the glittering world beyond my modest paycheck. When she told me they were engaged, I tried to smile. I tried to be supportive. but in my gut, I knew. Now, standing outside their grand house, unwelcome in my own daughter's life, I realized my gut had been right. She had chosen him. And in choosing him, she had chosen his world, a world where a man like me was nothing but an embarrassment. As I drove home, the bitterness should have consumed me, but it didn't. Strangely, I felt calm, almost too calm, because I knew something they didn't. Back at the firm, years ago, I had come across certain files that were quietly buried, locked away, forgotten, or so they thought. I had been the one to process them. I had seen the numbers, the shell companies, the hidden accounts. David's name wasn't there back then, but I recognized the style. It was him or men like him pulling strings behind the scenes. Fraud dressed as success. I still had copies. I had kept them, not out of malice, but out of instinct. Some part of me always knew they might be useful one day. And now, as I parked in front of my small, weathered house, I realized that day had come. They thought they had cast me aside. They thought I was powerless. But they had no idea the storm I could summon with a single call. The following week passed in silence. Anna didn't call, and I didn't expect her to. I knew she was busy posting photos of her new life online, the fancy dinners, the charity galas, the vacations with David where they smiled like royalty. Every picture was proof that she had climbed into a world where there was no room for me. But I wasn't angry anymore. Not the way I should have been. I was focused. At night, I would sit at the small wooden desk in my bedroom. On top of it lay the worn brown folder I had pulled from the glove box of my car. It had been there for nearly 2 decades, a relic of my years at the firm. I remember the day I first saw those files. I had been working late, like always. Most accountants dreaded year-end reconciliations, but not me. Numbers never lied. They told stories more honest than words ever could. That night, while reconciling transactions, I noticed a series of entries that didn't fit. Money flowing in and out of accounts under shell corporations, the kind that existed on paper but did no real business. At first, I thought it was an error, but the deeper I dug, the more obvious it became. Someone was laundering money, moving it through a maze of accounts to make it look legitimate. And the pattern, it was bold, too bold. I flagged it to my supervisor, but he told me to leave it alone. His voice was firm, almost fearful. Don't touch that file again. It's above your pay grade. That night, as I left the office, I made a choice. I printed copies. Something told me I might need them someday. Now, all these years later, I flipped through the faded pages. Numbers, dates, company names, offshore accounts, and though David's name wasn't there, the style was unmistakable. It was his type of game. I started digging quietly, not online, not where it could be traced. I still had contacts, old colleagues who owed me favors, men who now worked in banks and legal offices. I asked simple questions, never too many at once. Bit by bit, I began to piece together the picture. And what a picture it was. David's fortune wasn't built on brilliance. It was built on deception. He had ties to 3 shell corporations, one of which was directly linked to the old files I had kept. He was cycling investor money through fake ventures, paying old investors with new investors' money. A house of cards. I leaned back in my chair, the folder spread open before me. My heart should have been racing, but it wasn't. I was steady, calm, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. I knew this wasn't the kind of secret you shouted in the street. No, it had to be placed carefully, precisely, where it would do the most damage. The first call I made was an old friend from the firm, Daniel. He had retired a few years back, but he still kept his ear to the ground. "Long time," he said when he picked up. "What's the occasion?" "I need a quiet conversation. Off the record." We met at a diner on the edge of town. He looked older, slower, but his eyes were still sharp. I slid the folder across the table. He glanced through it, and his expression darkened. "You've been sitting on this," he whispered. 17 years. He shook his head. "You know what this could do if it landed in the right hands." "That's why I called you?" Daniel leaned back, staring at me. "You're playing a dangerous game. Men like this, they don't fall quietly." "I don't need him to fall quietly. I just need him to fall." Over the next few weeks, things began to move. Not fast. I used to believe that revenge was a loud thing. Shouting, breaking, burning. But the older I got, the more I understood. The most effective revenge is silent. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with warning. It seeps in like water under a door until the entire house is flooded. That was exactly what I had set in motion. The first letters arrived to David's company within a month. Official-looking envelopes from government agencies, requests for documentation, clarifications on past filings, small probes that seemed harmless on the surface. But I knew what they really were. Hooks being lowered into dark waters. Once a hook is in, it doesn't come back empty. I didn't need to watch every detail unfold. My part was already done. The evidence I had released was enough to keep investigators busy for months. The rest was inevitable. But I still kept an eye on Anna and David. Old habits die hard. One Saturday morning, I parked across the street from their mansion. The sun was out, kids were riding bikes on the sidewalk, and there I sat, an old man in an old car, blending into the background. Through the iron gates, I saw David in the driveway. His phone was pressed to his ear, and though I couldn't hear him, I could see the agitation in his movements. His free hand chopped through the air, his face red. He was losing patience. That arrogance he carried like a crown was beginning to crack. Anna stepped out a moment later, holding a mug of coffee. She tried to hand it to him, but he swatted her away, barking something sharp. Her shoulders slumped. She looked smaller, weaker than I'd ever seen her. For a fleeting moment, my heart ached. That was still my daughter. But then I remembered her words, "You don't belong in this world." So I stayed in the car and watched. By mid-afternoon, I drove home. I made myself a simple dinner, washed the dishes, and sat at the table with the silence I had come to know so well. On the radio, a news brief mentioned an investigation into irregularities at a rising investment firm. They didn't name David yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. The next week, Anna called again. This time, her voice was frantic. "Dad, everything's falling apart. Investors are pulling out. They froze some of our accounts. David says it's just a misunderstanding, but—" Her breath caught. "We need help, please, just until it clears up." I let her speak, every word dripping with panic. When she paused, I finally said, "I told you before, I don't have much, but I'll think about it." She thanked me again, her voice breaking. And when I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not joy, not triumph. Peace. Because I finally understood this wasn't about making them suffer. It was about balance. The scales of respect, of sacrifice, of loyalty. They had tipped so far against me. All I was doing was setting them straight again. As weeks passed, the storm grew. Investigators uncovered offshore accounts. Journalists began printing stories. Whispers turned into headlines, headlines into accusations. David's smile disappeared from social media. No more photos of yachts, no more wine-soaked dinners. Instead, there were paparazzi shots, David leaving office buildings with clenched fists, Anna shielding her face from cameras as she hurried into cars. The neighborhood noticed, too. When I drove past their mansion again, I saw the way their neighbors looked at them. No more friendly waves, just cold stares, whispers behind hedges. The mighty had begun to fall, and everyone loves to watch a fall. Then came the lawsuits. Investors demanded their money back. A class action suit was filed. The papers called it one of the largest fraud investigations in the state. And through it all, I never said a word. I was invisible, but not to Anna. She called me more often now, sometimes late at night, her voice thick with tears. "Dad, I don't know what to do. Everything's gone. The cars, the accounts, they're seizing them. We might lose the house." I listened, quiet, patient, the way I used to when she was little and couldn't sleep after a nightmare. Except now, the nightmare was real. One night, David himself got on the phone. His voice was sharp, accusatory. "Old man, you've got savings. Don't play dumb. You want to see your daughter out on the street? You want to watch her starve?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. He, who had called me useless, a burden, was now demanding I save him. "I'll do what I can," I said softly, giving nothing away. He cursed and hung up, and I sat there in the dark, the smile creeping back onto my face. Because the truth was, I wasn't going to lift a finger to save him. Every call, every plea only confirmed what I already knew. They were drowning, and they didn't realize the water had come from me. By the end of the month, the mansion went up for sale. Not by choice, by order of the court. Cars were repossessed, accounts drained, jewelry seized. They went from high society darlings to pariahs overnight. And still, I said nothing. The quiet strike was complete. The dominoes had fallen exactly as I had set them. But there was still one last step, one last move to make sure that when the dust settled, Anna and David would know, not just that they had lost everything, but who had made it happen. The mansion sold quicker than anyone expected. Wealth attracts vultures, and as soon as the bank announced foreclosure, investors and rivals lined up to pick the bones clean. I didn't attend the auction, of course. That would have been reckless. Instead, I worked through a lawyer, a man who owed me a favor from years back. On paper, it was just another real estate transaction. In reality, it was the completion of my plan. I didn't need a mansion. I didn't even want one. But to buy the house David had bragged about, the house Anna had once told me I'd never belong in, it was more than a purchase. It was closure. By the time the deal went through, David's empire was in ruins. Investigators had enough evidence to press charges. Fraud, tax evasion, wire manipulation, the list went on. His face was plastered on every news outlet, no longer as the charming investor, but as the disgraced fraudster. They called it one of the fastest and most spectacular downfalls of a self-made man. Anna disappeared from social gatherings. Friends she had once flaunted turned their backs. No one wanted to be seen near the wife of a man about to stand trial. I saw photos in the papers, her hair unkempt, clothes no longer polished, hiding her face as she hurried into cars. It hurt to see her that way. She was still my daughter. A part of me wanted to reach out, to take her in my arms the way I used to when she scraped her knees as a child. But another part of me remembered the sting of her rejection, the way she had cast me aside like a broken tool. And so, I stayed silent.
David's arrest came on a Wednesday morning. The news replayed footage of him being led out of a courthouse in handcuffs, jaw clenched, eyes darting with rage. Anna wasn't by his side. She couldn't be. She was too busy trying to salvage what little was left. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea, when my phone rang. "Dad?" Her voice was fragile, stripped of its confidence. "Yes, Anna." "He's gone. They took him." Her voice broke. "I don't know what to do. I have nothing. The accounts are empty. The house is gone. I don't even know where I'll sleep next week." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. This was it. The moment when all her pride, all her distance, all her cruelty came crashing down into desperation. "Come over," I said finally. An hour later, she was at my doorstep. No chauffeur-driven cars, no designer coats, just Anna, pale and weary, clutching a worn handbag. For the first time in years, she looked like the girl I used to know, the one who ran barefoot through the yard chasing fireflies. She stepped inside hesitantly, as if she didn't belong. "Dad, I'm sorry. I said things I shouldn't have. I thought—" She choked back a sob. "I thought I was better than you, but I was wrong. I lost everything, and I don't know how to fix it."
I studied her, my daughter, who had betrayed me, humbled now by life itself. "You don't need to fix it," I said softly. "Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to see what matters." She wiped her eyes, nodding. "Can I stay here for a while?" I almost laughed. The irony was too rich. The daughter who once told me I didn't belong in her perfect world was now asking to live in mine. "Of course," I said. "This is your home too." Her relief was palpable. She sank into a chair, shoulders slumping. For a moment, we sat in silence, the years of distance between us shrinking ever so slightly. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. 2 days later, I asked her to take a drive with me. She hesitated, but agreed. We drove through the city in my old car, the silence heavy. Finally, we turned onto a familiar street. Her street. When the mansion came into view, her breath caught. "Why are we here?" I pulled over in front of the gates. Workers were inside, making renovations, repainting the walls, polishing floors. Anna pressed her hand against the window, staring. Her eyes filled with tears. It's gone. I can't believe—" "It's not gone," I interrupted. She looked at me, confused. "It's mine now." The words hung in the air like a hammer strike. She blinked, her mouth opening slightly. "What do you mean, yours?" "I bought it. Quietly. Through someone else. It belongs to me now." Her face went pale. She shook her head in disbelief. You bought it?" I nodded, keeping my voice calm, steady. "The house you said I'd never belong in, the world you said I didn't deserve to be part of. It's mine now." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Dad, why?" "Because," I said, turning to face her fully, "because sometimes people need to be reminded that the ones they cast aside are stronger than they ever imagined." She buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. I didn't reach out to comfort her this time. She needed to sit with it, the weight of her choices, the full circle of what she had done to me and what I had done in return. We drove back in silence. When we reached my modest home, she whispered, "I don't deserve your kindness." "No," I agreed. "You don't." And with that, I stood, leaving her in the car for a moment. When she finally followed me inside, she carried herself differently. No pride, no arrogance, just humility. That night, I sat in my chair, watching her asleep on the couch, her face streaked with dried tears. She looked peaceful, like the child I had once known. I realized then that revenge hadn't just been about destroying David. It hadn't even been about the mansion. It was about this moment, about making her see me, not as a burden, not as a relic of the past, but the man who had raised her, protected her, and, when necessary, taught her the hardest lesson of all. The empire was gone, the fraud exposed, the mansion reclaimed. But more importantly, the balance was restored. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to shout, threaten, or strike. All I needed was patience. And in the end, patience had given me everything. If you think what I did was too harsh or not harsh enough, let me know in the comments, and comment where you're watching this video. And don't forget to subscribe, because there are more real-life revenge stories you don't want to miss.